Okay guys, so welcome back again. So we are back again after a long time, but in this video we'll be talking about handling graceful shutdowns of our Nodejs Express server. So the logic and reasoning would remain same if you're using any other framework apart from Node.js, if you're using Django for Python, or if you are using Ruby on Rails. So whatever you are using, the reason would remain same, that why do you want to handle graceful shutdowns to your server? Suppose you are updating your server and you need to shut down your server and then restart the server again. Then to handle that shutdown of your server, then you need to handle that gracefully, because simply if you are sending a sick term signal, that is kill the process, or if you are simply pressing Ctrl C to restart the server by sending a second signal, then it may not behave properly on restart. So firstly, let's see the reason that why do we need to handle graceful shutdown to our server. So to give you a reason, let's take an example of a shop here. So let's say the shop is your server and all the customers that are inside your shop are your requests. So suppose if the shop needs to be closed for maintenance, then what would you do, or what would the shop owner would do? So the first thing he needs to do is to put a closed board on the entrance of the shop. That is, no other customers that apart from that are inside the shop, no other new customers are allowed to enter the shop. But what if the shop owner says that all the customers that are present inside the shop should leave immediately? That would not be a good experience for a customer, but instead the shop owner must allow all the customers that are present inside the shop to complete their orders or whatever they are buying, to pay the bills for that order, and then they can leave the shop. But no new customers are allowed. So until and unless the last customer is inside the shop while the shop is closed for maintenance, his orders, that is the customer's orders, are fulfilled and he or she exits the shop gracefully and not kicked out of the shop. So that's what we need to do inside our server also. That is, whatever requests are present inside the server, or whatever requests have been arrived at the server and they are in processing, we should process those requests and send back the response. But at the very same time, no new requests are allowed from the clients. So that's what we are going to do in this video, and that is super simple to do inside a Nodejs Express application. So without wasting any more time, let's dive into our code and let's see that how it's done. So if we have a look at this application here that I've created, so if we have a look at the package.json file, I've installed a couple of dependencies here, and these dependencies have nothing to do with graceful shutdowns. You can handle graceful shutdowns without these dependencies also, but they are only to initiate Express application. So here I'm using faker.js to simply generate mock data, Express for our Express application, Mongoose for making database connections to Mongodb, and then response time to see the response time header inside our response. That is how long the request took to get the response. So if we have a look at the package.json file, or firstly let's have a look at the user model.js file. So it is a pretty simple user schema with name, age and email, and this is what we have here to generate about 20,000 users we would be generating in a single call, just to show you that why we need to handle graceful shutdowns again. If we have a look at the app.js file, we have a super simple Express application. So we initialize the Express application here, and then we are simply using this module called, or this dependency called response time from response time, and it simply provides us a header with X response time. And then here we have a function here, so we'll come back to this function later on. And then we have a couple of routes here. That is the index route, which simply sends hello world here as the message here, and then I'll again come back to each and every route again. I'm just simply giving you an overview of the initial application. And then we have a route called get users, which simply gets all the users from the database. And then we have a route here to create a single user. So let me expand this. So it simply creates a new user without taking in the parameters from the request body. It simply generates fake name, email and age. And then we have another route here called add many users. So here what we are going to do, or here what we are doing, we are simply generating 20,000 users inside our database, again using faker.js, because this thing would take some time. And we see that how do we handle again the graceful shutdown if this request is processing. And then we have this route delete users to delete all the users inside the database. And then we are simply normalizing, or we are simply getting the port from the environment variable, or otherwise we would be simply starting it on port 3000. And then we have the typical app.listen thing, which simply prints out to the console that the server is running on port XXX. And then at the bottom here we have a couple of a couple of events from MongoDB or Mongoose. But firstly, we have this mongoose.connect function, which connects to our MongoDB on localhost, and the database name is restaurants tutorial. So that's what we have in mongoose.connect function. And then here we have the events of mongoose, or the mongoose connection events. That is, when the MongoDB is connected, we would be printing out mongoose is connected. And then if there is an error, we are printing out mongoose connection error. And when the mongoose connection is disconnected, we would be printing out mongoose connection is disconnected. So that's a super simple Express application. So now let me start the server here by doing node app.js, because I do not have a start script in my package.json file. So let me do node app.js, and we see that this prints here that is server running on port 3000 and mongoose connected to database. And now I'm using this extension in VS Code that is called REST client to make HTTP request. And if you go to this extensions tab here in VS Code, and if you simply search for REST client, then the first thing which you would get here, that is by this guy here. I don't know how to pronounce this proper noun, Hua Chow Mao. So that's what I'm using here by creating this file called rest.http to make our HTTP requests. So let's go back here. So if I simply make a request to this index route here, that is on port 3000, to get hello world, we see that we get back a response here, that is message hello world. And we see here the response time is also 2 milliseconds, almost 2 milliseconds. So now let's say that if this route were to do a long running task, so what we can do, we can use this function here that I created here, that is long running task, and it returns a promise here, that is resolve comma reject. And after a timeout of 5 seconds, because here I provided 5000 milliseconds, so it resolves after a timeout of 5 seconds. And then finally we are resolving it with an empty string. So what we can do to execute this function, what I can do, I can go to this route here, that is our index route, and here I can simply do await long running task, because this long running task returns as a promise, and we are inside an async function. So we can simply mimic some long running task here that keeps processing for 5 seconds. And what else do we have here? We have console.time here to simply calculate the time this request took to complete. And we have this log statement here, that is request received, and then we have log statement response sent, and finally we have console.timeIn, which would simply provide us the total time from line number 19 to line number 24 it took to process these lines. So that's what this console.time and console.timeIn means. So let's save this application, that is app.js file, and we need to restart the application here, because we made changes here and we are not using nodemon here. So now if I make a request to this index route, see what will happen. So I made a request, the request is received here, as you can see inside the terminal, and after a period of 5 seconds we see that the response is sent, and the default time is 5 seconds and 5 seconds and 3 milliseconds. And that's also what we have here inside this response time header, that is 5 seconds approximately, and we get back our response. So now what would happen, that if this request was received, that is as soon as this request was received and we tried to shut down a server, so what would happen to the request? So let me make a request here, and let's say we press Ctrl C to shut down the server, and we see that the server the response is never returned to our client, because this server is shut down. Now I'm manually doing it by pressing Ctrl C, but typically in a production environment, what would happen is this, that the system will send a sigterm signal, and if I press Ctrl C, the system will send a int signal to our Express application. So let's say, let me simply do one more thing, that is, as soon as I start the application, I also want to get a process ID when this on which process ID this application is running. So that is again pretty simple to do. Let me go to our app.js file, and this all would make sense in a moment when I will handle this Graceful shutdowns. So when this is running, let me make one more log statement here, or let me do it here, that is on process ID, and this process ID can be we can get it from process.id, sorry, process.pid, not process.id. So if we save our app.js file, and if we clear the console, and let me again do node app.js, we see that the process ID of our application is 90,963. So let me open another terminal here, and let me do a split here. I'm not going not getting a split here, but we can see here that our application is running, and if we want to kill this application, that is this with this process ID, that is 90,963, so we can do that very easily. So we can simply send 90,963 was the process ID. So we see that the process is killed, and if you go back to our this console here, we see that this process has been terminated. That is, node app.js process has been terminated by our command that we send here, that is kill 90,963. And this is what, that is this kill command to kill the process typically sends a sig term signal. So let's handle those signals inside our app.js file. So what we can do, we can simply say process.on, and here we can handle couple of more signals, but we are interested in the sig term signal and the SIGINT signal. SIGINT signal is only for development, and sig term signal is for production. So SIGINT, that is process.on SIGINT. So what we can do here, we have a callback function here, and here we can simply say console.log SIGINT received. Received, like this. And in the similar way, we can also handle the sig term signal. So let me do that as well. So sig term like this, and this should be sig term signal received. So let's save this. So let me start the application again. So let me press Ctrl C to stop the application again, and this time this event would be fired because we are sending Ctrl C here. So let me do Ctrl C. Oh, you see that SIGINT signal is received. So now let me start the application again. So we see that the process is not exited here. Now to actually close the application, we need to exit the process also, because if we are handling the SIGINT signal or the sig term signal, we need to exit the process. We need to exit the process also. So what we can do, we can simply say process.exit, and here we need to pass in a code. So by passing in code number 0 here, it means that we are simply saying that it is a success code and the process can exit successfully. So we can simply do it like this, and the same thing we would do it here, that is on sig term also. So let's save this. So we need to close this terminal here. So I've closed the terminal. So let me start the application again. And this time we see that we are up and again, that our server is up and again. So what I'll do, I'll simply open another terminal, or before opening another terminal, let me simply press Ctrl C again to exit the process by passing in this code here, that is 0. So let's see, press Ctrl C, and we see that signal is received, and we are exiting the process with the status code of 0, which means we are exiting the process successfully. And in the same way, if I simply clear out the console once again, and if I simply start the server again, we see this time our process is on 91,500 process ID, and we can open another tab here or another terminal here, and this time we can simply send a kill signal or a kill command to fire up this event, that is sig term. So let me press this. So nothing happens here, but if we go back to our previous console, we see that this time the sig term signal is received. So these are the two most important things that you should know, that is what is SIGINT and what is sig term. So if you're sending a kill command, then it means sig term, or if you're pressing Ctrl C, it means that the process receives SIGINT signal. So now what I'll do, I'll simply start the server again. So this node app.js, or before starting a server, let me minimize the terminal here. So now, to handle graceful shutdowns, what do we need to do? We need to successfully or gracefully shut down our server. So if we have a look at this app.listen method here, or app.listen function, this function provides us a server instance. As we can see here, if we hover over this listen thing here, we can see that it simply provides us with an instance of HTTP server. So what we can do, we can simply extract that, or we can simply make a constant variable here, that is server equal to app.listen, and nothing changes here. But this HTTP server is now can be referenced by this constant variable here, that is server. So as soon as we receive a SIGINT signal, so now what I'll do, I'll simply cover one of the things here, that is second, and then we'll simply use this sec term also, because we need to do the same things inside the second and the sec term. So I'll be focusing on this second as of now. So as soon as we receive a second signal, what should we do? We should close down our server. That is, we put a closed board outside our shop or our outside our server. That is, sorry, we are closed for now and we would be up again later. But for now, no other further requests should be allowed inside our server. Whatever requests are inside our server, we would be processing those requests and we would be sending back the response to the clients, but no new requests are allowed. So that's what we are going to do here. So here what we would do, we would simply say server.close like this, and then we have a callback function here like this. And in case you want to handle the error inside the close function, you can handle that as well, but I'm not going to do that because it is not necessary. So here inside this, what we need to do, we need to say console.log. I'm simply making log statements that our server is closed. So server is closed like this. Now, when we close the server, it means that no further requests are allowed, but this callback function would only be fired when all the HTTP requests that were originally present inside the server would be processed. That is, only after the requests that are present inside the server are processed and the response is sent, only then this callback function would be fired. So now what we need to do, we need to simply exit the process only when all the requests are processed. So let me take it at the very top, that is this log statement. So now if we save this application and if we open our terminal here, and let me clear it out and let me start the application by doing node app.js, and if we go to our client here and if we make a request here, that takes 5 seconds. So let me send a request here. We see that request received, and we see that the response is sent and it took this many seconds. So let me stop the process here, and this time we see that second signal is received, and at the very same time we see that server is closed because there were no other pending requests to be completed. So therefore the server is instantly closed. But this time watch what would happen. So let me clear the console once again. So let me start the application once again, and now what I'm going to do, let me make it like larger here. So now watch what would happen. So I would be clicking this button, that is send request, and before completing 5 seconds, because this request takes 5 seconds to process, and before that those 5 seconds are complete, I would be stopping my server by pressing Ctrl+C to send a second signal. So watch what would happen. So let me send a request here, request is received. So let me put Ctrl+C. We see that we get a message here that a second signal is received, but at the very same time, we also see that the response is sent. The default time is this time here, and only after that the server is closed. That is, only after we have processed all the requests, the server is closed. So this is how you handle graceful shutdown. So if you want to see it once more, so let me do it once more. So let me clear out. So node app.js. So you can start your timer as soon as I press the send request button and as soon as I press Ctrl+C. Because let me press send request, let me press second, that is Ctrl+C. So we are here, that is second received, and then once we process the request, that is this response is sent, then only we are coming here, that is server is closed. That is this thing here, and moreover you can see that this server is closed is coming after this default time is printed. This default time is coming from this line number here, that is from line number 24, and only after that the server is closed. So this is how we handle graceful shutdowns. And in the same way, what we can do, we can copy all the logic here, that is server.close, and we can paste it here inside the sec term also. So if I save this and if I do node app.js once again, so node app.js once again, we have this process ID. So what we can do, we can simply send a kill signal to this process ID in a moment. Let me split it. Let me delete this terminal here. Let me do it this way. So now what I'll do, I'll simply send a kill signal to this process ID, that is 92118, so that we can see both in view. And let me go to this REST client here. So let me make a request here. So request received. Let me send a term signal here. Term signal is received, but the server is closed only after we process the request. That is only after we send the response. So this is how we handle graceful shutdowns. So now let me take it one step further. That is, we also see that we have MongoDB here. That is, using Mongoose, we are handling MongoDB. So to handle or to close the MongoDB connection from our application, what do? We cannot simply do it here. That is, we cannot simply do it like this. That is mongoose.close, mongoose.close, or mongoose.connection.close. We cannot simply do it like this. Because we need to close the connection, that is the MongoDB connection, only after the requests have been processed, because they might be communicating with the database. So we need to keep a track of that also. So it is pretty simple to do again. So once our server is closed, that is all the requests that have been processed, only then we need to close the database connection. So what we can do, or we can do it like this here, that is mongoose dot connection dot close, and here we need to pass in a boolean value, that is whether we want to force close the connection or we want to gracefully close the connection. So we simply want to pass in false here, that is we do not want to close it forcefully, so we simply pass in here false. And finally we have a callback here, and we can again print out here, that is mongoose connection is closed, or otherwise we have this function here, or this event handler here, that is whenever the mongoose connection is disconnected, we would be printing out mongoose connection is disconnected. So this event would be automatically fire whenever we close the connection. So here finally what we can do, we can simply say process.exit like this, that instead of doing it this way, we only exit the process once the mongoose connection is closed. So we need to do it this way, like in a callback hill, and the same thing we need to do it for the term signal, like this. So I simply copied and pasted here. So let me go to our REST client here again, and let me start the application by doing node app.js. And this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to create 20,000 users by hitting this route, that is add many users. And this route is this route here. So let me minimize the terminal. So this route is this route here. Again, we are simply logging in the request started, the console.time started, and then we are simply creating a array of promises, and then we are fulfilling all the promises to create all of the 20,000 users, and then we are simply sending back the response. So let's do that. So let me simply create 20,000 users by hitting this button here. So let me see it here. So let's click here, and it would take some time because we are simply creating 20,000 users, and we are simply sending back the count of the total users. And we see that the default time it took is about 2 seconds to create 20,000 users. So what would happen if the server is shut down in between processing this request? Some records might have been created, some records might not have been created, and your database might not be in line with the data that you expect. So therefore it is very necessary to gracefully shut down the server. So let me do it again. And as soon as I create 20,000 users, what I'll do, I'll simply press Ctrl C here immediately, just to show you that we would be getting back a response of 20,000 again. So let me simply do send request by creating 20,000 users, and we stop the server by pressing Ctrl C. So we see that this time the signal is received. If we can see here, that is second request started, second signal is received, the default time is this time, the response is sent, the server is closed, and finally the mongoose connection is disconnected. That is, mongoose connection is disconnected only after the server is closed. And in the same way, we can handle the skill thing here, because that is eventually what would be used if you are hosting your application in a production environment like Heroku. Because if you update your application by listening to updates from listening to commits from the GitHub, that is automatic CI/CD, then Heroku sends this kill command, and that is handled by this term block here, that is kill command is handled by sigterm, so therefore it closes the server gracefully. And in the same way, if you are using pm2 also, then also it simply sends a sigterm command to close the server, and then it updates the application, and then it restarts the application. So let me do it once more. So if I simply delete all the users here, we would be seeing that the count should be 40,000. So let me click on this button here to delete all the users. So we see that acknowledge is true and the deleted count is 40,000. So let me do one more thing, that is I'll show you this kill command, that is sigterm signal also when we are creating some 20,000 records with MongoDB. So the server is started. We have this PID here. So let me copy and let me paste it here, and we should do it like kill. And now if I click on create 20,000 users, I would be simply coming to this terminal to enter this command, that is kill this process. So let me click here, let me come here, and we see that request is started. We send a kill signal to our process, and we got this with sigterm signal received. The default time is 2 seconds and some milliseconds. The response is sent, the server is closed, and finally the Mongoose connection is disconnected. So this is all what you need to know about graceful shutdown of the Nodejs Express server. So guys, if you have liked the video, do hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe to the channel by hitting that red button. So thank you, bye bye, tata, take care, and have a good day and have a great day.